of whether we're using technology or technology is using us. Is that a question that is answerable at this point? Are we using technology, or are we more sort of not victims, but servants to whatever is happening that big tech is rolling out?
Well, it's certainly always both. I feel like we have more agency in that than we often recognize. Although, of course, it also depends on our job. I mean, to be perfectly honest, I think the people who are the most affected by algorithms and AI are the people who have the least power in the workplace. Some of us have more agency than others, and there are a lot of professions where probably it's time that there was significant pushback in terms of how much control over the circumstances of our work AI has.
Well, if you think about that pushback, do you see guardrails coming? Or in some cases, do you even see guardrails as possible?
Guardrails is a funny question, because I think that when you're talking about people, especially in blue-collar professions, having some power over their workplace, like absolutely they should have more of that power. But when you talk about guardrails in terms of these, let's just call them what they are, chatbots, I think that to advocate for guardrails, I have kind of the opposite view. I think to advocate for guardrails there is to buy into this hype that these chatbots are going to become super intelligent soon. So we have to do so-called super alignment to make sure that they don't try and kill us all, get the nuclear codes and whatever. I think that's pretty silly.
This is comforting. I mean, I'm sure you've had this conversation before with people when you talk to them about AI and you sort of give them your thoughts on that. Do they find it comforting?
I think people do find it comforting. Sometimes, though, they push back. I mean, I think there are a lot of people who, we're in an age where there are a lot of compounding issues that can feel like existential threats. And I think there is a certain amount of fatalism creeping in where people are like, ugh, like AI is going to take over all the creative jobs, and the only thing that's left is going to be the rote stuff where AI is my boss. But I think in general, definitely when people hear, no, it's not going to become super intelligent and become Skynet or something, yeah, I would hope that's comforting.
It is. So then finally, Christopher, you've been writing this column for 10 years. You've written about stuff that has been wild successes, and you've written about failures of all shapes and sizes. Do you find yourself becoming more optimistic about tech and big tech and technology, or perhaps more cynical?
I think I remain a guarded optimist. I think I am vastly more cynical about the stuff that paradoxically we hear about the most. I think that there is so much tech that kind of gets pushed on us, like, oh, these new AI PCs or, super intelligent chatbots or whatever. And it just feels like nonsense and a distraction. But then when I look deeper and I look at the way that people are using even AI, for example, to solve real world problems, to make systems more efficient, to make them safer, I do feel optimistic about that. That progress is still happening.
Well, Christopher Mims, thank you.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure being here.
Christopher Mims is a technology columnist for the Wall Street Journal. That's all for this week. The Cost of Living is based in Calgary. And if you're looking for one more way to listen, you can now stream live radio on the CBC News app. You can also get all the news on the CBC News app. How's that for branding? The show is produced by Daniel Nerman, Ellis Cho, Jenny DeRosio, and Jennifer Keane, with help from Caroline Ferris. We'd also like to give a special thanks to Helen Henderson. She just retired. She's a very special friend of the show, and she was a really good boss. Everyone should be so lucky. Thanks, Helen. I'm Paul Haberstrood. Thanks for listening.
This is CBC Radio 1, 990 AM, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg.
We carry a world of information in our pockets because we want to know. Breaking news that shapes our world, staying on top of stories around the globe, and connected close to home. It's news you can trust, delivered when you want and where you want on Canada's News app. Now with CBC Radio 1, local and live. Download the CBC News app for free.
You know the feeling of finding a really good podcast? Or the feeling of someone always being there, like your favorite radio show? Stream CBC Podcasts, CBC Music, and CBC Radio anytime, anywhere.
This is CBC News. Good afternoon, I'm Josh Crabb in Winnipeg. At noon, it's currently 15 under a cloudy sky, mostly cloudy, and 14 in Brandon this hour, mostly cloudy, and 15 in Thompson. The disappearance 6 months ago of an 81-year-old man with dementia is being investigated as a critical incident. Last December, Earl Moberg walked away from his home. He hasn't been seen since. His daughter, Britt Moberg, says they were trying to get him proper health care supports at the time. A WRHA spokesperson confirms the case will be reviewed as a critical incident to better understand if there is anything the system could do differently and to see if any improvements can be made. Moberg hopes something good can come out of a terrible situation.
We want to find my dad, and we all want to prevent something like this from happening from anybody else, because it has been it has been incredibly painful and horrible.
Moberg also wants to see improvements to the Silver Alert system to notify people in an area if a senior with dementia goes missing. The federal government is once again being pressed on what it would do if there was evidence a Liberal MP committed treason. An intelligence report last week suggested some parliamentarians had colluded with foreign nations, but did not name names. The Prime Minister has read the unredacted document. Deputy PM Chrystia Freeland says the issue is best examined by the inquiry into foreign interference.
We support expanding Justice Hoag's mandate to review these issues in an appropriate way, in a way that respects national security considerations.
MPs will vote this afternoon on a motion to allow an inquiry into foreign interference to investigate these new allegations. All parties are expected to support it. Hunter Biden says he is more grateful for the support he has received than he is disappointed by today's verdict. The son of the U.S. president has been found guilty on all 3 counts related to the illegal possession of a gun. This marks the first time a sitting president's family member has been convicted of a felony. Chris Reyes reports.
Following his conviction, Hunter Biden walked out of the courthouse in Delaware holding the hands of his stepmother, First Lady Jill Biden. The charges relate to a gun purchase Hunter Biden made about a decade ago when he admitted he was addicted to crack. Biden has written a book about his drug addictions and getting sober in 2019. Biden was accused of lying about his drug use on federal firearms forms. The defense argued that Biden was not using drugs during the 11 days he owned the gun. He could face up to 25 years in prison. Amy Lee Copeland is a criminal defense attorney in Georgia. She says it's unlikely Biden will be given maximum jail time.
I anticipate that this would be somewhere in the neighborhood of about 1.5 to 3 years.
President Joe Biden says he accepts the outcome and will respect the judicial process. Chris Reyes, CBC News, New York.
Now to Tel Aviv.
Everyone's vote is in, except for one vote, and that's Hamas. And that's what we wait for.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says a ceasefire deal is within reach if Hamas leaders in Gaza choose to accept it. Blinken says he received private assurances from Israel's prime minister backing a U.S.-led ceasefire proposal. That deal was also endorsed by a UN Security Council vote yesterday. It would bring about an immediate ceasefire, along with Israel's withdrawal of troops from Gaza and the return of hostages held by Hamas. The three-phased plan would then open the door to a permanent ceasefire, which Israeli leaders had previously called a non-starter. In his ongoing campaign for global support, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is in Berlin, and his whirlwind visit has included an appearance at a post-war rebuilding conference, a meeting with Chancellor Olaf Scholz, and an address to the German parliament. Abby Kwevasin has more.
A warm welcome for Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky as he arrived in the German parliament to give his first address before MPs. He thanked Germany for its support and said, "We will not pass this war on to next generations."
We will win and rebuild Ukraine together.
Earlier, he attended the Ukraine Recovery Conference. The event is all about garnering further support and investment for the long-term reconstruction of Ukraine, but also ensuring Kyiv's European Union membership hopes are on track.
Ukraine is Europe.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says they'll provide Kyiv with the windfall of frozen Russian assets. Zelensky and Scholz will meet again in Italy in a few days for the G7, when the Ukrainian president will push for more support. Abby Kwevasin, CBC News, Berlin.
A potential job action at Canada's borders has been averted. The unions representing more than 9,000 Canadian border workers have reached a tentative deal with the Treasury Board. The deal still needs to be ratified by the members. Details of the agreement will be revealed later this week. And Calgary's mayor has delivered some good news to thousands of people in her city today.
To everyone in Bowness, your patience and your strength over the last 5 days has been unwavering, and we appreciate it so much.
Jody Gondik says a boil advisory has been lifted for the neighborhood at the center of a massive water main break, but a large feeder pipe that broke last week has still not been fixed. Repairs are expected to continue for a few more days. Citywide water restrictions are still in place. And that is CBC News from Winnipeg. Your next local news is at 12:30. For news anytime, you can always head to cbc.ca/Manitoba or download the free CBC News app.
Hello, my friends. Thanks for joining us today for Radio Noon here on CBC Radio 1. I'm Janet Stewart. Imagine a world where menopause isn't a part of aging. Researchers believe they're working toward that reality. But is it a goal we should be reaching for? If it were safe to eliminate menopause, would you do it? That's our question for our call-in conversation today after the 12:30 news. How young is too young to start teaching children about mental health care? Coming up on Radio Noon, why an organization that helps survivors of family violence wanted to talk about emotions at Winkler's Teddy Bear Picnic. And the United Nations Security Council has approved its first resolution endorsing a ceasefire plan in the war between Israel and Hamas. The head of a Winnipeg-based international aid organization tells us what's at stake for the people of Gaza. That is where Radio Noon begins today. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in his 8th tour of the Middle East, going to all the capitals today, traveling from Cairo to Tel Aviv, turning the pressure up on Hamas to accept a new ceasefire proposal. The latest proposal has the backing of the UN Security Council, but this deal still isn't done. According to Andy Harrington, a ceasefire can't come soon enough for the people of Gaza. Harrington is executive director of the Canadian Food Grains Bank. He joins us now by Zoom. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Janet.
What is the latest you've heard on the humanitarian situation in Gaza?
Well, it is quite a horrific situation at the moment. The population of Gaza is 2.2 million, and all of them are at imminent risk of famine. And we kind of grade hunger on a scale of 1 to 5 in terms of the international development world. And over half of the people there are at the worst levels of hunger, level 5. That's in or either in catastrophic famine. That's when people are dying. That's when there's acute malnutrition. That's when things are absolutely desperate. We know that 37% of children in Gaza at the moment are wasting, which is the worst form of childhood malnutrition that you can see. So the situation is really catastrophic.
Can a person recover from that kind of hunger?
Well, that's a very good question. It isn't just about giving them food. It's going to involve, for some of those children in particular, long-term support for malnutrition. So obviously one of the things we want to see at the moment is this ceasefire that we're so pleased is being talked about at the UN. But we recognize it's not just about getting the food in for the immediate situation, which is really quite critical at the moment. It's also going to need to be the long-term support and stabilization for people, so especially for young people, so that they can recover from that kind of both trauma that they've experienced and also the malnutrition. The effects of malnutrition it can be quite long-term. So it's not just about getting in there, getting some food and getting out. It's going to be a long-term stability plan that's needed.
Getting in there has been a big issue. What is it like for humanitarian organizations to get food aid or any sort of help into Gaza?
Janet, it's very difficult at the moment. So the two main crossings, Kerem Shalom and Rafah, are both being closed. Before the conflict broke out, it was estimated that Gaza needed about 500 trucks a day in order to have the supplies that's needed for the population of 2.2 million. In May, so far, we've seen under 1,500 trucks. But when the conflict ramped up, especially around Rafah at the beginning of the month, on May the 6th, we saw a real drop even from that level. So actually, between May the 6th and May 29th, which is the last figures we had, only 216 trucks made it through. So that's less than half a day's supply in most of a month. So things are very, very serious. We have been able to get some distribution of food in there, but at the moment the borders are blocked. The food is actually waiting at the borders or in warehouses, waiting to go on trucks so that we can get it in there. But until we can get those borders opened, and also the peace and stability that's needed to distribute that food safely, this catastrophic situation will continue.
What networks still exist on the ground in Gaza when it comes to getting help to the people who need it?
Well, that's a great question. The situation is very fluid. So from I can speak from Canadian Food Grains perspective. We have two members, a Mennonite Central Committee and Development Peace Caritas Canada, who are working with a partner each on the ground there. So those partners are operational within Gaza. We've been able to do two distributions of food that served about just over 22,000 people altogether. We have a lot more ready to go, and our partners are ready to receive it. We have warehouses where we can store that food. We'll need to distribute it quite quickly because the need is so great. All we need is the access and the safe lines of communication in terms of transportation to be able to get in there. So the partners are active on the ground. We know that World Food Programme and other agencies that we cooperate with are active on the ground as well. But the situation is very fluid. You never quite know where the next part of the conflict is going to arise. We've seen 268 aid workers killed since the start of the conflict in Gaza. So it is a safety situation as well as a supply situation.
But I'm just imagining, as a head of an organization like yours, thinking of the food just sitting there and the people who need it.
Yeah, that is exactly right. I was talking with one of our members and their partners this week. We have a distribution that's been ready to go in a warehouse in Jordan for some time now. This is MCC, also based here in Winnipeg. They're working with their partner on the ground. The food is there. We're waiting for trucks. We're waiting for the ability to get across. Reuters is reporting that food is spoiling in the sun at the moment, so we don't want to take it out of the warehouse and have it waiting on a truck where it could spoil. We need to get it from the warehouse onto the truck, over the crossing, which is just a few miles away, and into the supply depots that we have there, and then distribute it as fast as possible. And so it is absolutely, you said it so well, it is really heartbreaking to know that we could do so much more if we could just get access to the people that are so desperate at the moment.
What is the Canadian Food Grains Bank calling on the government to do?
In terms of the government of Canada, we would love to see the more advocacy applied towards this ceasefire proposal and this peace proposal that is put in place. We believe that the government is acting as far as it can in order to do that. We know that the Security Council passed a resolution, as I believe was reported on your newscast there, and 14 of the 15 members voted for, one abstained, so that has been put forward. We're waiting on Hamas and Israel to reply to that. The Canadian government needs to continue its advocacy, which it is doing, because all of us who are humans, let's take it away from government, Janet, let's just speak as human to human. All of us who are humans are watching what's going on there with despair on both sides of the conflict. We are a neutral humanitarian organization. We don't take sides. Where we stand is with the children of Gaza, with the women of Gaza, with the young men and young boys of Gaza who are in absolute desperate needs. Just imagine this was your child And imagine they were 10 kilometers away from food, and there was artificial barriers in order to stop that food getting there, and you were watching them starve to death. That is the situation we're facing at the moment. We need to see that ceasefire happen and safe distribution set up as soon as possible.
Andy Harrington, thanks for joining us today.
It's been a pleasure, Janet. Thank you.
Andy Harrington is Executive Director of the Canadian Food Grains Bank. To comment on what you've heard here today, to keep this conversation going, remember you can leave a message for us anytime at 204-788-3797.
Whether it's breaking news from around the world, across the country, or in your own hometown, it's all at your fingertips on the CBC News app. Get the top stories from where you live under the local tab, or watch video clips, live events, and the national on your smartphone or tablet. Get all the news you want, when you want it, where you want it, with the CBC News app. Download the app for free today.
It is 12:15. I'm Janet Stewart. Thank you for joining me today for Radio Noon on this Tuesday. Still to come today, how young is too young to start teaching children about mental health care? We're going to talk to members of an organization that helps survivors of family violence and find out why they wanted to talk about emotions at Winkler's Teddy Bear Picnic this past weekend. First time they've done that. How did it go? We'll find out. And then in our call-in conversation after the 12:30 news and weather, we're going to talk about a subject that we don't talk about enough, in my humble female opinion. We're going to talk about menopause and what information women really need. It's generally understood menopause is a normal part of aging. But what if it wasn't? Scientists are working on ways to pause menopause and maybe even eliminate it. If they found that ability and it was safe, is that something you would opt for? Is this research we should be looking into? The number to call coming up will be 780-0893. We open our phone lines at 12:30. 12:30 is when your news will be updated right here on CBC. And then Riley Lachuk, our weather specialist, will join us to take a look at the weather for the province of Manitoba in northwestern Ontario. Here's a tune from Winnipeg folk band Leaf Rapids. This is Starling to a Starling.
Angeline Tadaweo hosts The Block.
Afrobeats to jazz, hip-hop to R&B, calypso, Kez the Dan, Michelle Montano, Bob Marley, Bounty Killer. So we really give all these artists a chance to shine, and the key is in the programming, in making it make sense, and making sure that the music is fluid, a fluid experience.
The Block with Angeline Tadaweo. Available now on CBC Listen.
The time is 12:20. You're listening to Radio Noon here on CBC Radio 1. I'm Janet Stewart. Going to the doctor or the dentist can be scary for young children. That's part of the genius behind teddy bear picnics. Kids bring their most beloved stuffies with them to the park. The stuffed animals then go for checkups and get any injuries they may have bandaged up. It gives the kids a bit of experience, so when it's their turn to see a doctor, it's not so daunting. This past weekend, Winkler held its teddy bear picnic. Staff from Genesis House, a shelter for women and their children escaping violence, talked to children and their stuffies about mental health care. Two of those staff members join us now by Zoom. We're so happy they're here with us. Madison Fair is the children's counselor. Hello, Madison.
Hello, thanks for having us.
And Sophie Gerbrandt is working there, of course, at Genesis House with community development. Hi, Sophie.
Hi, Janet. Thanks for having us.
Madison, this is the first time you've introduced the subject of mental health to children at the Teddy Bear Picnic. What inspired the idea?
Yeah, so we see a lot of children coming through our shelter. And one of the biggest things is talking about feelings and encouraging parents to also have a healthy relationship with feeling comfortable talking about feelings. And so we figured, why not do the same thing at the Teddy Bear Picnic? Because, they, like you said, they focus a lot on physical health, which is all really important, but we know that emotional health is also just as important.
Sophie, so describe your booth to us. We're trying to picture how you would broach the subject with the kids.
Yeah, so we try to make it as accessible for kids as possible. I would say the majority of the kids that we saw on the weekend were around 5 and under. So we need to make this fun and a hands-on activity. So we made physical emotions wheels with little spinners that the kids could actually take home with them and use as a tool with their parents as they continue to talk about feelings and emotions. And then we brought these little pineapples along, if you could imagine the classic Mr. Potato Head, but these are kind of a reimagined toy, a feelings pineapple. So there were different mouths and eyes and eyebrows that you could create different looking expressions. So we were able to engage with the kids in a conversation in that way, and they could do some hands-on activities too, which always helps.
What was the lesson there, Madison, that you're trying to get them to talk about?
Yeah, so we gave them their feelings wheel, and they got to pick a feeling from the wheel and then create that facial expression on the pineapple. So sort of just that beginning introduction of identifying a feeling and identifying what it would look like on someone if they were expressing that feeling.
So that's emotional intelligence as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
You get, to recognize the signs somebody else might be sad or happy or absolutely. How does exposing kids to these conversations and giving them a little bit of language early on help? Madison?
Yeah, absolutely. So just like with anything, learning about feelings and emotions takes practice. And so often with kids and with parents, I describe it as like we're trying to make those neural pathways in our brain bigger. So we talk about it's a dirt road now, and the more you practice, it slowly becomes a highway, and now it's like the number one highway kind of thing, and talking about how the more we use these things, the bigger and stronger that muscle gets. And so it's just really important to start that young because, well, first off, we know that we all have feelings. And so being able to identify them can help us to regulate those feelings. But I think just like the muscle in the kids, it's the same thing for us as parents. And so starting those things early helps us to become more comfortable with it as adults so that it becomes like it becomes easier for us to use with our children as they grow.
Sophie, did you sense any hesitation from the parents as they approached and, well, what is this?
I think there was maybe some surprise when people stopped by our booth. Teddy bear picnics, I think, are a really popular activity for families, so they may have stopped by one or two already this summer, and there hasn't been talk of mental health at these other teddy bear picnics. Madison and I are actually both parents, so we know all about teddy bear picnics. But the response was really positive. We also had brought along some handouts for parents with some information and tools that they could use when engaging with their kids and having this conversation at home to continue that learning. So it was great. There was positive responses all around from the kids and from parents. So that was really encouraging.
What are some of those take-homes if somebody's driving along with their children right now and they're thinking, oh, how do I open this up? What's a good piece of advice for a parent or grandparent?
Totally. I think just, starting to label those feelings, whether it's while you're reading a story and saying, oh, what is the bear like? The bear looks like he's feeling happy, or engaging some of those words and just normalizing the fact that we all have feelings, and modeling how we work through those feelings with our kids is like the biggest thing that we can do to help them be more comfortable with their feelings.
How does this goal interact with your goal for your clients and their kids at Genesis House? How does everything come together?
Yeah. So the majority of the kids that we see are in that same age bracket, that 5 and under. And we know that witnessing domestic violence can impact a child's development, in the same way that being a victim to domestic violence can impact them. And so we see a lot of kids coming, especially at that age, they already have big feelings. And then after experiencing these traumas or witnessing them, it can kind of make those feelings bigger. And so the parents are also going through those same experiences. And so just trying to find fun and easy ways to just kind of help everybody practice those feeling words with their kids and encourage those discussions can help, because we know that we just recently changed our logo because it used to be 1 in 4 women experience domestic violence, and it's now 1 in 3. And we know that we don't, unfortunately, get to see all of those families come through our services, or they experience domestic violence for a long time before they reach out. And so hopefully we're planting seeds in everybody so that they have a little bit more of those tools and that increased resiliency for the experiences that they have.
And especially in a situation where you might be, the adults around you might be trying to pretend everything's fine, right? For everybody's safety, everything's okay. Yeah, Sophie?
Yeah, I think just going back to the physical health aspect of the teddy bear picnic, I think a lot of times we don't just go to the doctor when it's an emergency, right? We go in for these checkups, but right now when we see kids at the shelter, we're seeing them in crisis situations, right? So we're trying to find opportunities to connect with families when they're not in crisis, or maybe they haven't identified that they're in crisis yet, and we can give them tools along the way. So we're not just doing this emergency care, but we can provide education along the way that hopefully we can do some prevention as well.
Madison Fair and Sophie Gerbrandt, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Janet.
Yes, thank you for having us.
Madison Fair and Sophie Gerbrandt both work with Genesis House in Winkler. They hope to encourage children to be more comfortable talking about their feelings. Well, we're almost at that magical mark where we open our phone lines. What the heck? Let's do it 15 seconds early. The phone lines, 204-780-0893. In the second half of today's program, we're talking about menopause. There are scientists working toward a reality where menopause could be delayed or even eliminated. Is that something you'd like to see? Join our call-in conversation. Right now, the time is 12:30.
This is CBC News. Good afternoon. I'm Josh Crabb in Winnipeg at 12:30. It's currently 15 downtown under a mostly cloudy sky. It's 18 in Melita and 11 in Flin Flon. The daughter of an 81-year-old man who vanished 6 months ago is pleased his case will be investigated as a critical incident. Earl Moberg had dementia and lived at home when he wandered away last December. He has never been found. His daughter, Britt Moberg, says they had been trying to get proper health care supports for him when he disappeared. A spokesperson for the WRHA confirms his case has been reviewed and meets the criteria of a critical incident, which includes unintended injury or death when healthcare services are provided. Moberg hopes the review will prompt change.
And hopefully coming out with some ideas that will be able to hopefully prevent serious injury and death from happening again. So I'm hopeful that this could be life-saving, and I'm hopeful that this could also, certainly shows the importance of services.
Moberg says as the population ages, there is more need for support services and care for people with dementia in their homes. A Toronto judge says mental illness was a factor in the killing of a woman on a city bus 2 years ago. Today, she found the man charged in the case not criminally responsible. Tenzin Norbu was accused of attacking Nima Dolma in June of 2022 and lighting her on fire. The 28-year-old later died in hospital. The two did not know each other. The judge-only trial heard Norbu had been diagnosed with schizophrenia when he attacked Dolma and had displayed psychotic behavior for nearly a decade. Norbu will now be sent to a psychiatric hospital until a review board determines he is no longer a risk to the public. Hunter Biden has been convicted on all 3 felony gun charges at his trial in Wilmington, Delaware. The jury issued its findings this morning after deliberating for 3 hours over 2 days. The case against the son of U.S. President Joe Biden stems from a gun purchase the 54-year-old made 4 years ago. He claimed he wasn't a drug user, although he now admits he was addicted to cocaine at the time of the purchase. The guilty verdicts come with a maximum 25-year prison sentence. However, many legal analysts say a jail term is unlikely. And McGill says it is making a new offer to organizers of the pro-Palestinian encampment on its campus more than 6 weeks after it started. And the school is asking protesters to sit down with a third-party mediator to discuss it. The proposal includes a review to explore divestment from weapons manufacturers and a mandate to support Palestinian scholarship at McGill. McGill is offering disciplinary amnesty to staff and students who took part in the protest, but it would exclude incidents under investigation. That is CBC News from Winnipeg. Your next local news is at 1:30.
Thank you so much, Josh Crabb.
You're welcome.
Josh Crabb covering news for us today. Riley Lachuk joins me in the studio as well. Hello, Riley.
A little bit of a wet morning.
Another one.
In parts of the Red River Valley.
Yeesh.
In southern Manitoba, which is where I'm going to start because we'll talk about some of the rainfall accumulation that we saw. Pretty much bang on what we were looking at in the forecast yesterday. So Brandon, Wawanesa getting into that 10 to 20 millimeter range. Brandon itself, 16 to 18 millimeters, depending where you were in the city. Portage La Prairie, Morden, Winkler, 7 and 8 millimeters respectively as of early this morning. And in Winnipeg, about 5 to 6 millimeters of rain overnight last night into the early morning hours. So pretty much bang on what we were looking at yesterday in terms of rainfall, and that has for the most part pushed out of the province. In fact, we're already starting to see a little bit of sunshine into western Manitoba, and we'll see that sort of clearing west to east as we get through the afternoon hours. Where we are seeing some rain still, though, is in parts of northern Manitoba, for example, places like the Hudson Bay Coast, the Island Lake region, even into Thompson, looking at a bit of rain through the afternoon today, tapering off. In terms of accumulation, maybe 5 or 10 millimeters through parts of the north. As mentioned, that does taper off as we get through into the evening tonight. So a few showers still yet to come for northern Manitoba by the time we start tomorrow morning, though. Mainly sunny skies. Could see a little bit more instability in the south. And I mention that because by the time we get to late afternoon with some of the temperatures and the conditions we're expecting, good chance that we could see some thunderstorms popping up with the risk of a severe thunderstorm in southern Manitoba through into the late afternoon, early evening hours on your Wednesday. That pushes out overnight into Thursday morning, and we're starting with mainly sunny sky on Thursday. I want to talk about storm energy, or CAPE, for a second. This is forecast modeling that combines a bunch of different variables, kind of looks at all the ingredients that are there for thunderstorms. And yes, all of those ingredients are shaping up to make for a bit of an unsettled day tomorrow in terms of thunderstorms, especially through the late afternoon. We could see some of that popping up. Most likely Trans-Canada Highway and south, but into the Brandon, Westman, into the Riding Mountain region, could see some pop-up thunderstorms as well. Today will be breezy, Janet. We're looking at west winds 30 gusting 50 through the afternoon, tapering off as we get into the evening tonight, and we're back to pretty calm winds, actually, as we start the day on Wednesday. Today, looking at a high of 22 in Winnipeg, 23 in Brandon. We're looking at gusty conditions, but mainly sunny skies. I want to quickly talk about tomorrow, though, because we're looking at temperatures, especially in that region I was talking about with the thunderstorm potential. 30, the high in Morden tomorrow, 28 in Sprague, Fort Frances looking at 29 degrees. Winnipeg tomorrow looking at 23, 24 degrees in the afternoon. Slim chance of some instability first thing Thursday morning. And then we're looking at 26 degrees for Friday.
One of those warm temperatures that could contribute to thunderstorms.
Yes, exactly. The ingredients will be there.
Ooh. Thank you so much for tracking all this for us, Riley.
No problem.
Riley Lachuk, our weather specialist, will be back during Up to Speed today between 3 and 6 p.m. here on CBC Radio 1. And he'll be back on our TV newscast as well tonight at 6. Remember, you can watch it anytime you like on our YouTube channel, CBC Manitoba's YouTube. Hello to everyone watching on YouTube. Remember, you can leave comments there too if you want to join our calling conversation today. Menopause is a stage of life roughly half the population of the world will experience, and it's one some people dread. You very seldom hear anything about menopause, and if you do, chances are it's negative. Today we're going to talk about that. Last week, CBC's Julie Dupre reported on scientists who are looking at ways they might delay menopause or even eliminate it. She talked about pharmaceutical approaches and even surgical methods. How do you feel about that? If there was a safe way to delay or eliminate menopause, would you opt for it? Why or why not? 204-780-0893. That number again, 204-780-0893. Our guest today is passionate about helping patients navigate any issues they face in menopause. Dr. Kelsey Mills practices general obstetrics and gynecology in Victoria, and she joins us by Zoom. Dr. Mills, thanks for being with us.
It's a pleasure.
Now, to be clear, you are not one of the scientists examining the possibility of delaying or eliminating menopause.
Correct. I am just one of the physicians who is helping people going through the menopause transition out here in Victoria.
Is it research that you're at all familiar with, or shall I avoid asking you any questions about it?
I think the idea and interest in delaying or, changing the menopausal experience has always been of interest to scientists. I don't think we're there yet, but it certainly is an interesting question and direction.
Well, it's one that's had a couple of people calling in already. Let's talk to Judy. Hi, Judy. Thanks for calling Radio Noon.
Hi there.
What do you think of the idea of perhaps eliminating or delaying menopause?
I think that may be one of the stupidest ideas I have ever heard. I'm 73 years old. I was thrilled when I achieved menopause and got through it. I haven't had to buy tampons for 30 years. And I cannot imagine why anyone would want to be capable of getting pregnant at the age of 60 or 70 because we didn't have menopause.
You've just made Dr. Mills laugh. She threw her head back and laughed, so you know, Judy.
Okay.
So that is something that you might agree with, Dr. Mills, that why would anyone want to be pregnant at that age?
I think what this caller is saying is that there are a lot of reasons to celebrate and respect women as we age. And I think that there are many cultures in which aging is a sign of your experience in your life. And I hear a lot of women say that menopause has been freeing. Women have to go through often horrific changes in their bleeding patterns, worry about unplanned pregnancy and contraception. And menopause can be a freeing time for some people. Absolutely.
Why is it then that so many of us feel uncomfortable about it, dread it?
Yeah, I think for a long time that stems from a lack of information and a lack of general conversation on this topic. I think for decades, women have been told this is normal, just bear it, grin it, get through it. And it's been a taboo subject. And so I think menopause is now starting to have its moment. There's a lot more freely available information, and people are really beginning to embrace this transition in their life.
Judy, if you're still with us,
I am.
What was the experience like for you? Did you struggle under any symptoms that were awful?
Oh, there were symptoms, but they weren't exactly what I'd call a struggle. You had your hot flashes that were sometimes a little awkward when you were sitting in a management meeting and you had to flap your suit jacket because you were boiling to death, or when you woke up at 3 a.m. with a hot flash and your sheets were damp. But other than that, it wasn't a deal. My doctor gave me, I think it was testosterone possibly, to mitigate some of the effects of menopause. And I coasted through it quite easily with the help of a little medication. And coming out the other end, it was just, as the doctor said, freeing.
Judy, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye. Dr. Mills, let's talk about managing symptoms. What are the symptoms that women most often need help with?
I think, as your caller mentioned, a lot of people are familiar with hot flashes and night sweats that wake women up in the middle of the night. I think we're paying more and more attention to women talking about mood changes that happen during the transition, certainly changes in bleeding pattern. And we're learning more and more that symptoms like joint pains, like palpitations, like bladder, and vaginal and vulvar symptoms, those are all validated symptoms of menopause. And women are becoming more aware that these are things that they can bring up with their healthcare provider. And all of the symptoms that I mentioned have possible treatments.
204-780-0893 is the number to call if you've got questions about menopause, if you want to tell us what your experience has been like, or if you want to freely admit that if there were a safe way to avoid it, you'd avoid it. 204-780-0893. This is something that happens to people born female. So, but that it impacts men and children as well. Maybe you want to talk about your mom. Maybe you want to talk about, what do I do? It was an experience for me as a husband to learn about keeping the heat down and just putting on another sweater. Join our conversation, 204-780-0893. Hormone replacement therapy. A number of years ago, was that 15 years ago? 20, perhaps, there was a big nurses study that came out that said it could be dangerous, or that was one of the concerns. And I know there was a real rush then for people to join, to get off hormone replacement therapy, which may not have been the right thing to do. What do you think?
That's Mills? A great point. So the study you're referring to was the Women's Health Initiative, or the WHI, and that was a big study that looked at hormone therapy in a certain group of women at a big age range. And we've learned a lot of valuable lessons from that study. Unfortunately, what happened was that the messaging that came out of that study, which still remains for a lot of physicians and women, is that hormone therapy is dangerous, that it causes cancer, that it's not appropriate treatment. And now, after reanalyzing the data and looking at safe ways to prescribe hormone therapy for young people under the age of 60, we understand that hormone therapy is a safe and first-line option treatment for people who are having hot flashes and night sweats and even mood challenges. But you're absolutely right. That was a very big study. We learned a lot from it. But one of the major criticisms was that women who were in their 60s and 70s were put on large doses of hormone therapy. And then we saw increased risks of things like heart attacks and blood clots. And we've learned a lot about how to properly and safely prescribe hormone therapy. And all major menopause guidelines agree that hormone therapy is safe first-line therapy for women in menopause.
Margaret, thank you for calling Radio Noon. Hi,
Hello.
Margaret. Hello.
Good. Hi. How are you?
I'm great. What do you think of our question today and the research that some scientists are doing into perhaps delaying or even eliminating menopause?
I think it's a very poor option to spend money on and resources on. I can see spending time and energy on helping those women that need it to get through menopause. I had very heavy flow at that point, the hot flashes, everything else, but I would rather do that than have a period until I'm 75, 95. And be pregnant. Like, I just think that's ludicrous. I've talked to my daughters who are in their 40s and 50s, and all of them are saying, like, I'm just waiting for menopause. I want it done. I want finished with buying pads and tampons and the whole business. And they thought it was silly that we're trying to do that.
Margaret, thank you so much for joining our conversation. How much of this, Dr. Mills, is because it's something that we haven't talked about before, because it has to do with things that people thought were unpleasant or you didn't bring up in company, or because it happens to women and therefore it doesn't get as, that it's known that research into women's health issues isn't as well funded as research into men's health issues. I'm not making that up. How much of that misunderstanding can be blamed on those gender factors?
I think you've touched on quite a few things that add to sort of the menopause mystique, if I can call it that. Certainly, one of the issues is that there are aspects of the menopause transition that are sort of intimate health issues. So a lot of people, and maybe even a lot of physicians or practitioners, have a challenging time talking about bleeding or talking about vulvar skin changes or things like that. I think another major issue that needs to be addressed is the stigma around female aging. And it is not tolerated or accepted that we see women age. And just look, what happens in the media watching female celebrities age, for example. I think another issue that, there was a great New York Times article written last year by menopause experts. And I'll paraphrase, but one of the statements was around the normalization and acceptance of female suffering. And this idea that women suffering in the menopause transition, that this was just something they had to do and was acceptable. And I think that a lot of those sentiments are changing. And I just want your listeners to know that if you're struggling with terrible bleeding, if you're struggling with soaking, drenching night sweats or horrible mood changes, there are treatment options out there. And please go to your medical provider and say, I need help. This may be a normal stage of life, but what I'm going through is not normal or acceptable for me.
Brenda joins us now. Brenda, what's your experience been with menopause?
Hi. Well, I was postmenopausal at 42.
Gosh, that's young.
Yeah, it is really young. Like, I was having symptoms before, like maybe, 5 years before. It took a while. The doctor I was seeing at the time wouldn't take it seriously. He said, well, I can give you something to calm you down. And I walked out of his office and found another doctor. It was actually a Chinese doctor that was doing some treatment on me, and he said, I don't think my treatment's working. I would get these tests done, and it was the FSH and LSH hormone tests, and I found a great doctor, and she did them, and she couldn't believe what she was seeing, that I was very post-menopausal at 42.
Well, thank goodness for that doctor you went to for traditional medicines. I'm assuming that you mentioned he
well,
was a Chinese practitioner, but he did point you in the right direction.
Yes, he certainly did.
When you hear stories like this, Dr. Mills, how frustrating is it for you as someone who strives to provide great care, that women like Brenda get laughed at or told, you just need to calm down. Not laughed at, but you know what I mean? Not taken seriously.
I would tell you that Brenda's story is not a rare one that I've heard. I hear a lot of women who tell me that they were told that they just needed more antidepressants or anti-anxiety drugs. And then they would say, I'm still not feeling right. And Brenda's story in particular is really important because we know from good quality scientific studies that women who go through menopause under age 45 are at increased risk of heart disease, of dementia, of osteoporosis. And we need to pay particular attention to people who are going through menopause on the earlier side so that we can help them with preventative health maneuvers.
That is one of the arguments that the scientists who are looking at delaying menopause make, is if perhaps estrogen drops in estrogen levels are responsible for these health issues that do crop up post-menopause. Do you think that's enough of a reason to keep looking for a way to delay menopause?
I think this research is really interesting, and I always find that when research goes in one direction, we learn a lot about it to help with other aspects of the overall health question. So I'm excited to see where it leads. But certainly we learn more and more about menopause all the time. And this is an exciting time to be a menopause specialist and to be a person who's deserving menopausal care, because we have more treatment options now than we have ever had. And we know more about this process than we ever have. And so it's really exciting and positive.
We also have the internet at our disposal, which for the wonderful things and the bad things has one of the bad things is that it can spread falsehoods very quickly. Are there any misconceptions out there about menopause that you'd like to clear up right now?
That's a great question. I think what it speaks to is looking for high quality information about menopause. And so if I can direct your listeners, there are lots of great resources out there. One that I would like to encourage people to check into is the Menopause Foundation of Canada, which is a patient-led organization with a scientific advisory board that I'm privileged to be a part of. They are doing advocacy work that is evidence-based for Canadian women, and membership is free, and it is an incredible organization. We also have great open access information from the Canadian Menopause Society, and also the Menopause Society, which is the North American organization. Patients can go to these websites and access high quality evidence-based care, because I agree with you, there is a dearth of information on Instagram and Facebook about which vitamins are going to fix all of your symptoms. And there are a lot of great general health principles out there, but I really encourage people to go to evidence-based sources, and that information is there for you.
There was something I saw, CBC News was covering it today, dispelling myths on TikTok about menstruation and whether or not tampons were safe. And so go to a reliable source and try to talk to your younger friends to direct them to reliable sources too. I can just imagine having been 16 or 15, whatever, and trusting TikTok as opposed to talking to my mother or my doctor, because again, the embarrassment factor.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of great information on social media. There are great evidence-based people out there really trying to get good information and take people through what studies mean and how they apply to themselves. But one thing I always caution people about is if somebody's trying to sell you something, then really think hard about what the conflict of interest is there and whether or not that's, a good idea for you.
Well, Dr. Kelsey Mills, I see our calls. We have a caller coming in. Do we have time? Can we talk to this person? I always love taking the calls. It's the funnest thing about this job.
Absolutely.
What haven't we touched on? You've got the province of Manitoba, Northwestern Ontario, listening to you right now. What is it that you would like people to know as we wait to see if...
My number one, important point is that just please don't struggle alone. Please seek help. And go to your physician, go to your nurse practitioner, tell them how you're feeling. Ask them if there's any treatment that you might try. And if your practitioner isn't sure, that's okay. But then ask if they can direct you to somebody else who can help. I meet so many people who have struggled with really terrible symptoms for 5, 10, 20 years. And there's help out there. So
and again,
sometimes we just
there are healthy options or safe options.
Absolutely.
Because that fear of the hormonal therapy is still out there. But there are safe options.
Absolutely.
Well, Dr. Kelsey Mills, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to chat with you. Dr. Kelsey Mills, is a general obstetrician and gynecologist. She practices general obstetrics and gynecology. Join the conversation. It continues by leaving a message, 204-788-3797. Right now, we flip our attention to the wonderful Faith Fundal, who joins us in studio. What's coming up on Up to Speed?
And we're going to continue the awesomeness on the show this afternoon, Janet. 10 outstanding people, all shaping Manitoba in impressive ways. We're going to hear from more from Alex Nguyen, who is also well known as their drag persona, Ruby Chopsticks. They are one of the CBC's Future 40 finalists. We'll hear more from them about the very cool work that they're doing. So stay tuned for that.
All those Future 40 finalists are amazing people. I'm so thrilled that we continue with this award system.
Someone in the newsroom said, if these are folks and this is what they're doing at 40, we've failed.
Yes, we all feel like terrible failures.
What have we done?
It's so inspiring.
It is very much.
Yeah. And that's the coolest thing about our jobs, isn't it? The people we get to meet and to tell Manitoba
about. And by the way,
about.
if you haven't seen the list yet, cbc.ca/Manitoba/community. The full list is there.
And think of someone you know who might be deserving of a recommendation next year, a nomination.
There's lots of folks here.
There are lots of really great people doing really great work. Faith Fundal's one of them. Thank you, Faith.
Thank you.
Faith hosts Up to Speed, which begins today at 3 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1, runs until 6 o'clock. Of course, you can catch that on the CBC Listen app or on the CBC News app as well, which now offers local radio all in one app. And remember, you can watch this program, specifically the conversation, our call-in conversation that we have in the last half, that generally isn't on the CBC Listen app, but you can find it by going to YouTube and searching for CBC Manitoba's page. Our conversations are there, so you can, again, leave comments at 204-788-3797, continuing the conversation. Let us know what you think we should be talking about here on Radio Noon. I want to thank Travis Peterson for directing the show on YouTube. Thanks so much, Travis, for all your work on this. Dylan Longhurst is our studio technician. Thank you, Dylan, for the beautiful music. Wendy Parker is our producer, our studio director. She's the person who answers the phones and tries to get everyone through to have their questions answered. Thank you to Nellie Gonzalez and Leif Larson for their leadership as well. You are listening to CBC Radio 1. My name is Janet Stewart. I'll be right back here tomorrow at noon. Hope you can join me. Coming up next on Radio 1, it's Unreserved with Rosanna Deerchild. Have a great Tuesday.